At the European Security Summit, the moderator spoke with precision, introductions flowing smoothly as he handed the floor to Kaja Kallas, setting the stage for debate. Imagine a scene so charged with tension it crackles in the air. What if one man's words could shatter decades of European illusions? Feel the chill of impending confrontation. Kaja Kallas stepped forward briskly, each click of her heels echoing like a ticking clock. Her eyes held a void, cold and resolute, blonde hair framing a face sharp as a Viking statue. She wore a dress in icy peach and blue, not for beauty but for defiance. "I won't take long," she began, her voice slicing the silence. "Baltic nations are exhausted by Russia's constant shadow. It behaves like a relic from the 19th century, trampling our borders, spewing threats, unleashing cyber attacks. Enough is enough. Estonia stands unafraid. We choose freedom." The room pulsed with unease, a magnetic pull. Some Scandinavian delegates shifted uncomfortably, others gripped chairs, most frozen in stunned quiet. Only the camera whirred softly, zooming on the Russian envoy. The operator captured his unflinching gaze. He didn't flinch. Then, he raised his head slowly, commanding the hush like a storm settling. "What is freedom?" Medvedev asked softly, his tone like a blade honed on history. "Are you certain you grasp it?" Kallas stiffened, her face twitching toward a smile. But silence gripped her. "You claim Russia frightens you," he continued, eyes-piercing, exposing the hollow boasts of inflated budgets, NATO expansions looming like ghosts, American arms vanishing into Balkan shadows. Rifles echoing in distant conflicts. How could leaders forget the tremors of past upheavals? Surprise rippled through the delegates. A Lithuanian scribbled furiously, incredulous murmurs hinting at translator errors. Cameras tightened their focus. "This isn't a mere exchange," a delegate muttered underneath. "It's a dismantling." Yet, was this really about defense, or hidden fears unraveling? Medvedev leaned in, his voice steady, each word a thunderous whisper. "Freedom isn't erecting anti-Russian monuments or gladiator spectacles, nor twisting the sacrifices of those who fought to spare your people annihilation. It's responsibility. You trade it for stone idols." He didn't shout, yet the microphone amplified his quiet fury. Kallas turned, her expression a mask of bewilderment, lips parted in silent shock. "You talk of fear, but who truly trembles?" he added, gaze locking like unbreakable chains. The hall hummed with unspoken dread, chairs creaking as bodies tensed. Sweat beaded on foreheads, the faint scent of coffee and wool clinging in the stuffy air. What ugly truth lingered beneath her polished exterior? How would she counter the storm brewing inside one man's unflinching truth? "You erased the hands that built your world, yet whimper at power," his whisper deepened, a promise of revelation. What if this summit exposed not just rhetoric, but the fragility of entire empires? The air thickened, heavy with anticipation, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable crack. In a high-stakes diplomatic meeting, tensions ran thick as Dmitry Medvedev delivered a powerful counter to the accusations hurled by Kaja Kallas. A moment ago, Medvedev sat in silence, but now, he seemed to pulse with intensity. His presence radiated authority clad in a mild gray suit, a subtle yet deliberate choice. The air was charged with anticipation as he clocked Kallas's words, echoing not just through the room but across the entirety of Europe. The first words he spoke cut through the room like a knife. "You say Russia will scare you?" Silence enveloped the audience, a quick gasp audible from the crowd. His demeanor, calm yet unyielding, challenged the narrative spun around him. The delegates felt the icy grip of uncertainty as Medvedev's gaze scanned the room, piercing through every facade, as if daring anyone to challenge his conviction. He leaned forward slightly, words now a gentle but firm rumble. "Freedom comes with responsibility." His voice softened, yet the impact was undeniable. Do not confuse memories of soldiers with mere pawns in a game played by those seeking control. The room held its breath. Kallas's sharp retort approached, but Medvedev's quiet power was stretching the fabric of the moment tighter. A subtle shift in Kallas's demeanor suggested surprise. The nodding heads of Eastern European representatives stirred a faint unrest. They sensed a pivotal confrontation was unfolding, one that transcended mere politics. Then, at that fleeting instant, Kallas spoke again, her tone cold but layered. "You claim these soldiers were not liberated. Wasn't it the struggle for autonomy you sought?" Yet Medvedev wouldn't yield. With a slight smile, almost pitying, he replied, What will you do if those you remember as liberators were merely overseers? The air crackled, suffocating and electric. Moments stretched interminably. Each side was casting shadows that they hoped would intimidate the other, but it was clear this was about more than just retorts. The audience shifted uneasily, the gravity of history weighing on their shoulders like a hidden stone. Just as Carlos prepared to challenge him again, the room quaked with the weight of an unspoken truth. Would this simmering confrontation ignite a greater conflict, or would silence mend the rift? With tensions at a boiling point, the outcome lay just beyond their grasp. Would reason prevail, or was a storm brewing that no one could predict? Kalas's voice cracked with icy tension, her words hanging like frost in the air. She had just fired back at Medvedev, calling Soviet soldiers occupiers, not saviors, mere replacements with tanks instead of true freedom, twisting history to fit her narrative. But what if the change she decries were the very walls that shielded her nation from total collapse? In the grand hall, the air grew thick with the scent of polished wood and stale coffee from forgotten cups. A delegate from Eastern Europe nudged his neighbor's shoulder, the fabric rustling softly, as if bracing for thunder. Everyone sensed it, a raw clash brewing, hearts pounding like distant drums. Medvedev stayed rooted in his seat. He didn't lunge for the microphone. No, he just stared ahead, his gaze steady, not furious, but weary, like a seasoned healer eyeing a misguided soul who mistakes symptoms for the cure. The room's hush amplified every breath, every subtle shift in leather chairs creaking under weight. When you speak of us that way, you ignore those elders who still whisper of the day our forces shattered the iron grip of invaders on your streets. Cities teetering on ruin, suddenly breathing again. Or those here today who tour your museums, not the shadowed KGB vaults you parade, but the forgotten camps where flames devoured innocents, Jewish families and Russian youth alike, their screams echoing in the night soil and ash. Seconds stretched into eternity, the silence buzzing like a held breath in a storm-swept room. One more tick of the clock, and then, eyes locked on the assembly, Medvedev broke it, his tone even. Unyielding as forged steel. History isn't a tidy string of easy words. It's raw terror, muddied ground, blood-soaked soil that stains forever. If you choose to dwell in that selective corner, blotting out who hauled you from rubble heaps, who erected your bridges over raging rivers, powered your grids with humming stations, raised your schoolhouses brick by brick, that's your path. But don't demand we beg pardon for the stand we took. For the victory that echoes in your bones too. Kalas's fingers tightened on the table's edge, knuckles whitening like fresh snow, her composure cracking just a hair, as if she yearned to flee this verbal courtroom into safer shadows. Yet she seized the microphone once more, her voice slicing through the tension. We never sought your bridges. Never your classrooms. Freedom, that's what we craved. Everything you erected? A cage, gilded perhaps, but locked tight. You're at ease in that confinement, but it's still a prison. And there, Medvedev's shoulders sagged, not for show, but genuine fatigue, as though he'd endured this refrain 1,000 times, the weight pressing like damp fog on his skin. You label it a prison, one your own elders now recall through waves of longing, sharing tales by firesides. You dub it chains, when it birthed your parents onto the global map, pockets full for once, not barren voids. When kids returned home not with empty hands, but hope flickering like candlelight. When your avenues pulsed not with feudal scraps for survival, but promise. Was your memory truly that clouded? Or do you reshape it now, in the glare of new lights? The hall stirred faintly, murmurs rippling like wind through dry leaves, but what hidden scar would Medvedev unearth next to shatter her resolve? Her defiant stance masked a deeper fracture, one twist away from crumbling under the weight of forgotten debts. 5 minutes before the dramatic exchange, Dmitry Medvedev sat quietly, contemplating the storm brewing in the room. His presence commanded attention, contrasting sharply with the polished rhetoric of his opponent, Kai Kalas. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as Kalas launched into a passionate denunciation of Russia, accusing it of threatening Baltic security. But Medvedev listened, his expression revealing nothing, just a faint glimmer in his sharp eyes that hinted at the storm that was about to unfold. Do you truly understand freedom? He finally interjected, his voice calm yet resolute. The air thickened as the weight of his question hung like suspended raindrops before a downpour. Is freedom merely a ticket to erasing history? To honor only those who fit a narrative? His gaze pierced through the gathered European delegates, compelling some to squirm uncomfortably in their seats. He continued, I walked the streets of Tallinn. Those same streets were paved by the hands of my countrymen. I listen to your veterans, their stories etched with fear and pride. They remember real sacrifice. The silence was palpable. Kalas's confident facade began to crack. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Were they questioning their own ideologies? As Kalas gathered her composure, she countered, but your freedom came with chains for us. For decades, your kind ruled over ours. Though her voice trembled, it echoed, leaving a chill in the air. Medvedev felt the tension rise. He could see her resolve waver as she attempted to mask her discomfort with indignation. Was the truth too heavy to bear? You believe that? To call your past freedom? Medvedev shot back, his voice cutting through her doubts like a knife. You've chosen to forget those who suffered, as if erasure is a remedy. The crux of history, he argued, was not merely a tale of victory or defeat. It was stitched into the scars and triumphs of every life lost historically, every city built from ashes. Kalas, somewhat taken aback, hesitated. Her countenance softened, revealing the inner turmoil of someone caught in an ideological tempest. Could she rise above mere politics, and realize the diverse truths that shaped her nation? In a sudden twist, Medvedev leaned forward, a finger poised at the table. Russia has never left. We're the foundation where the fiercest battles for freedom were fought. And you can't erase that truth without consequence. He paused, allowing his words to settle over the room. The tension was no longer a routine diplomatic skirmish, it transformed into a pivotal moment in history. The hall fell silent, every eye fixated on Medvedev, who sat back, unyielding. This was no ordinary confrontation, it was the birth of a new narrative. Would Kalas rise to this challenge and confront the shadows of her past? Or would she retreat into the safety of familiar rhetoric? The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, a storm of emotions circling like hawks waiting to swoop down on the next move. The story was far from over. Just minutes ago, Dmitry Medvedev, the unyielding figure who refused to back down in Europe's tense arenas, unleashed a phrase that left Kaya Kalas speechless, her accusations crumbling like fragile ice. She aimed to blame Russia, to rally support, but his retort turned her triumph into stunned defeat, echoing across Baltic halls and shaking all of Europe. Stay tuned to the end, you'll be left breathless. Medvedev didn't just claim his spot at the table or the podium, he seized a moment far grander than any summit, a space where true power lingered without fanfare. No badges of authority adorned him, yet that absence fueled the fear he inspired. Clad in a muted gray suit blending seamlessly with the soft folds of his pale collar, he embodied quiet resolve, unmarked by jewelry or scars, as if standing alone in his authenticity. His hair, trimmed just enough to suggest recent resolve, framed a broad face etched with subtle lines, like a man descending from a solitary peak where destiny's path clarified. But what pierced deepest was the void around him, the eyes. Bold yet inviting, they held you captive, linger a second too long, and your convictions waver under their gaze. Unyielding, unflinching, they seem to whisper, I already know your words, and their hidden motives. Seated to the commission chief's right in a chair of warm ivory leather, he ignored the room's draft-teasing stray papers at the edges. No distractions from polished wood or bustling aides claimed him, he owned the expanse, the domain, the very essence of the gathering. The moderator's voice cut through with practiced precision. We proceed under the European Security Framework. Esteemed Ms. Kalas, you have the floor. Her strides were swift, not hurried, but charged, like someone destined to lead the charge. Determination burned in her steady eyes, her light hair pulled into a severe, unyielding line evoking a Nordic carving more than a living envoy. She wore a suit in chilled azure, stark and purposeful, chosen not for style but symbolism, its fabric whispering against the air like frost on glass. I'll keep it direct, she began, her tone slicing the quiet. From dawn's first light, we demand no more neglect. We Baltic nations tire of shadows from endless peril. Russia acts like a relic of the 1800s in our modern age. We witness border drills, hear veiled warnings, detect digital incursions. And enough is enough. Estonia stands unafraid. Estonia demands liberty. Tension thickened the air, a magnetic pull gripping the room, a faint Scandinavian chuckle escaped one corner, fingers drummed softly on wood elsewhere, but most held breath in heavy silence. Only the camera's low hum to the right and two distant footsteps broke it, the operator zooming toward the Russian envoy's impassive features, anticipating a flinch. He didn't stir. No blink, no shift, until suddenly, his eyes rose, claiming the hush. Thick, unyielding quiet followed, pressing like a weight. Freedom, he murmured, volume low but resonant. Are you certain you grasp its true weight? Callas leaned forward, poised to counter, but his calm, edged delivery stole her moment. Freedom isn't erecting walls against old foes or savage barriers. It's not trampling the sacrifices of those who bled to preserve your existence from oblivion. Freedom demands duty. Yet you trade it for rubble. He didn't shout, the microphone amplified his steady rhythm. Callas tilted her head, confusion flickering across her features into a forced smile. But words failed her. For now. You claim Russia terrifies you? Medvedev's stare dismantled her. He dismantled the litany of threats: escalating defense funds, NATO's encroaching shadows at borders, US arms vanishing into Balkan mists. Delegates shifted uneasily, one scribbled furiously, cameras word closer. Chaos edged her response. This isn't mere rhetoric from you, Mr. Medvedev. It's evasion at its core. You won't yield, and now you fabricate foes. Perhaps from your own doubts. He smiled faintly, warmth absent, like sunlight on steel. Enemies? No, Ms. Callas. We're simply too keen to recall your authentic face. We remember those who guarded your flanks, and who their partners truly were. Callas's poise cracked, no retort surfacing, the room growing oppressively still. What began as polite sparring swelled into a tempest, far beyond protocol. And this was merely the spark. The chamber doors creaked open, not signaling closure but inviting fresh breath before plunging back into the churning depths, not skimming waves, but sinking where folly drowns in raw truth, facts, figures, legacies. Where narratives ignite. Then, the discourse delved into history's undercurrents, the room's hush sharpening as breaths aligned. Let's address the Soviet era, Callas pressed, her voice rising like a clarion. Laced not with victimhood alone but fervent legacy, the kind that endures, demanding instant absolution as proof of virtue. What you term union, we name invasion. Did you erect schools? Indeed. But at gunpoint? Factories? Yes, but on our lands, twisting our visions, you doled out sustenance to stifle our tongues. We etch that in memory. Gratitude? Hardly. The hall stirred, murmurs rippling like distant thunder, the air thick with the acrid tang of polished oak and lingering coffee from earlier breaks. Medvedev paused, the silence stretching taut as a drawn bowstring, his fingers drumming faintly against the table's cool surface, deciding whether to yield the floor or reclaim it with force. But resolve won. His response unfolded deliberately, voice low and measured, evoking the rumble of approaching clouds. Permit me to recall 1941's onset, thousands of kilometers of paved roads laid, universities sprouting, hospitals rising to serve thousands per facility. Yet you tune out. It's simpler to insist it all dawn post us, sans us, against us. He leaned in, not aggressively, but with the quiet insistence of someone unveiling buried truths, the room's stale air growing heavier, scented with the faint metallic bite of tension. What forgotten sacrifices would he unearth next, turning her fire into flickering embers? In a moment filled with palpable tension and unyielding determination, Dmitry Medvedev stands at the forefront of a heated exchange in Europe, his presence that of unwavering resolve. Just moments ago, Estonia's Kai Kallos attempted to wield accusations against Russia like weapons. Little did she know that her words would provoke a powerful and unexpected response, leaving the room in a state of bewilderment. Summary of events: amidst the intricate web of diplomatic dialogue, Medvedev, dressed in a nondescript gray suit, cuts a stark figure against the backdrop of Europe's security deliberations. His demeanor, calm yet charged with a flicker of fierce intensity, hints at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Callas, quick and sharp in her retorts, aimed to incite fear, painting Russia as a relic of an older age. But Medvedev's response is nothing short of electrifying. Do you truly understand what freedom entails? Medvedev's voice pierced through the murmur of the room, drawing a collective breath. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. With every word, he challenged Callas, demanding an acknowledgement of history often buried beneath layers of selective memory. Are you so blind as to dismiss the sacrifices that were made for your freedom? He pressed, his eyes unwavering and fierce, as if attempting to pierce through the very fabric of their carefully curated narratives. His presence was magnetic, an unyielding force meeting Callas's deft provocations, creating a palpable conflict reflecting the deeper struggles within Europe. Each statement layered with historical weight. evoking sensory memories of past struggles, the acrid smell of fear, the echoing silence of history staring back. As Kalas attempts to rally her stance, Medvedev fires back with a calculated analysis of their shared past, reframing the narrative. The Soviet Union wasn't merely a tyrant. It forged bonds, built nations, and yes, there were costs. But do you dare remember who stands behind those monuments you now seek to erase? The air crackled as her bravado faltered, revealing the cracks in her carefully constructed argument. But this is only the beginning. What unfolds next is a clash of ideologies, each challenge met with fervent rebuttals, questions that echo in the silence of the hall, evoking not just responses but true introspection. In this battle of words, Medvedev is not only defending a narrative, he is sculpting a moment that could define the very future of their diplomatic relations. The dialogue took an unexpected turn, leaving the audience hanging on the precipice of realization. With Kalas poised for a rebuttal, the atmosphere shifted. What was supposed to be a definitive confrontation now teetered on the edge of transformation. Would this interaction reshape their perceptions? Would the shadows of history guide their next steps? In a world where memories are often manipulated, this exchange reveals that history is a living entity, shaped by the stories we choose to remember or forget. What happens next could change everything. Will they find common ground or lose themselves in the depths of their disputes? The echo of their voices lingers, and the resolution remains tantalizingly out of reach. The tension in the air was palpable as the debate raged on. Dmitry Medvedev stood poised, ready to counter the fiery words of his opponent, Kai Kalas. Just moments ago, Kalas had unleashed a torrent of accusations against Russia, her voice echoing in the chamber like a warning bell. Yet, Medvedev, with a calm demeanor, prepared to strike back with a measured response, one that would resonate through the halls of power in Europe. As Kalas spoke of freedom, claiming her country refused to live under the shadow of Russian aggression, Medvedev's eyes narrowed. He didn't flinch at her words, he absorbed them, the silence in the room thickening like fog. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, a moment that felt historical, as if a turning point was about to unfurl. The hall was filled with delegates, many held their breath, caught between the fierce rivalry of these political leaders. The sound of Kalas' voice was crisp, yet her words carried a deep chill. Medvedev finally broke his silence, lifting a glass of water slowly, deliberately, as though drawing out the tension for maximum effect. His voice, when it came, sliced through the stillness, sharp and unforgiving. "What is freedom?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Is it merely a facade, a convenient label, while you ignore the shadows of your past?" He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before continuing. "Memory is not merely what you choose to remember, it also encompasses the truths you would rather forget." The room held its breath. Kalas sensed the shift in dynamics, her confidence wavering ever so slightly under Medvedev's fierce gaze. He proceeded with precision, detailing the shared history that bound their nations, both beautiful and tragic. "You speak of liberation," he continued, his tone unwavering, "but that liberation came at a cost. The liberators you now celebrate were once the very oppressors." The room felt as if it clenched its teeth, unwilling to let the truths being spoken slip away. Voices murmured softly, some delegates exchanged glances, uncertain of the precarious balance of power unfolding before them. Kalas, striving to regain her footing, leaned forward, replying with the conviction of an athlete ready to pounce, a defensive maneuver cloaked in the guise of righteous anger. "Yet what you term oppression was our struggle. The buildings you say we owe you were erected in turbulence and blood." The sharpness of her remarks clashed with Medvedev's cool composure. Medvedev smiled thinly, a slight yet significant gesture, hinting at the certainty of his arrival. "What is a building, without the integrity of its foundation? Your struggles cannot compromise our reality. When we look back, we see not merely history, but the very lives woven into it." The atmosphere crackled. A stirring energy thrummed through the delegates as they listened. Medvedev continued, unfazed, his words penetrating the comfortable narratives Kalas had tried to uphold. "You're right to choose freedom, but do you have the strength to face its true price?" With each word, Medvedev painted a portrait of reality, a reality that challenged perceptions, confronts the past, and questioned the very essence of truth itself. The echoes of history reverberated within those walls, shaking the foundations of their dialogue. In that charged moment, something pivotal shifted. Would Kalas rise to the challenge, or would she falter under the weight of her own convictions? The silence that enveloped the room was broken only by the soft click of cameras, capturing a moment that felt both monumental and deeply human. With one last look, Medvedev seated himself, the tension still swirling like an unseen tempest around them, and the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. He knew they were heading towards a critical juncture, one that could reshape their nations and their narratives forever. What would happen next? The evening was far from over. In a charged European security meeting just moments before, Dmitry Medvedev shattered the air with words that left Kai Kallas speechless, her bold accusations crumbling under the weight of a devastating retort. What if the so-called victims were the real aggressors? Who truly built the foundations of freedom for the Baltics? She didn't flinch at first. The echo of her remarks hung like a heavy fog, the word occupation slicing through the room sharper than a rusty blade against delicate glass. Kai Kallas knew the game. In politics, silence is the deadliest weapon. But Medvedev remained still, lifting a glass of cool water to his lips. Sips echoed softly, the chilled liquid trickling down his throat like a reminder of forgotten winters. Then, he set it aside, the condensation leaving faint prints on the polished table. "You are right," he said, his voice steady yet laden with an unspoken burden, raw and unfiltered. Deportations occurred. Repressions. Tragic errors, heavy as stone. The air grew thick, the scent of stale coffee from distant urns mixing with the faint metallic tang of tension. But we won't erase history. The full book is too laden. He leaned forward, fingers tracing the table's grain, rough like bark from ancient trees. In a sudden flashback, memories flooded back, the scent of fresh pine in post-war Tallinn, the rumble of Soviet bulldozers leveling ruins, the tactile warmth of blueprints handed to local engineers. Thousands of Baltics owed their livelihoods to those very foundations. During that era, the Soviet Union fortified its cities and yours, he explained. Who reconstructed after the devastation? Who established the healthcare systems you still rely on, unable to replace them fully? His words dripped like slow rain on a tin roof, each one piercing the silence. You claim liberation? Who delivered free education, accessible even in remote villages, lighting paths for your children's futures? Kai Kallas shifted uneasily, her expression hardening. But Medvedev pressed on. You label it ideological imposition. Yet compare, the USSR arrived with books, tanks, and engineers. What of the West's so-called freedoms? He swept his gaze across the hall, the subtle rustle of papers punctuated by uneasy breaths. France in Africa? Britain in India? America in Latin America? Delegates from Asia and South America sat straighter, the weight of unspoken grievances hanging like dust motes in sunlight. We taught, Medvedev continued, his tone unyielding. They exploited. We constructed homes. They hoarded resources. We devised joint plans. They issued directives. You tag us as occupiers. Yet they are called partners. Uncomfortable truth, isn't it? A soft murmur rippled, the hall's air thickening with muffled scents of wool overcoats and nervous sweat. Kai Kallas fingered her notes, but remained silent. The tension coiled tighter, ready to snap. What explosive secret lurked beneath these revelations? Moments earlier, Kai Kallas escalated her tirade, alleging Soviet brutality as unrelenting control, her voice reverberating through the room like a distant thunderclap. But what if Russia's actions were far more transformative than the West's imperial grabs? Did the Baltics truly owe their modern world to bystander liberators? The room pulsed with her lingering accusations, the word occupation reverberating like a dull hammer on fragile porcelain. Kai Kallas paused deliberately, wielding silence as her sharpest tool, the chill of unspoken fears seeping into every pore. Dmitry Medvedev didn't rush, reaching for his water glass. Cool droplets slid down his fingers as he drank, the chilled essence quenching a sudden thirst amid the heated debate. You speak truth, he responded, his voice measured but burdened, carrying the raw edge of unvarnished reality. Deportations marked our past. Repressions loomed large. Mistakes weighed heavily, tragedies we cannot undo. Microphones hummed faintly, capturing the shift in energy, while a faint aroma of aged wood from the chamber's panels underscored the gravity. But we'll never confine it to one page. The full narrative is too profound. He paused, eyes distant in a brief sensory flashback, the acrid smoke of wartime fires in his youth, the gritty feel of construction rubble under boots as engineers rebuilt shattered European cities, a haunting echo of hammers forging new lives from ashes. In those rebuilding days, the Soviet Union not only fortified its own territories but yours too, he elaborated. Who erected the post-war frameworks your societies depend on? His questions hung in the air, rhetorical arrows aimed at exposed truths. Who implemented healthcare networks you haven't fully dismantled? Who provided accessible, quality education, even in isolated hamlets? Kai Kalas twitched, her gaze cooling. Fingers tightening on her papers with the subtle crackle of tension. You dismiss it as ideological coercion. Yet examine closely, Medvedev urged, his tone gaining steel. The USSR brought literature, machinery, and expertise. Conversely, the West's liberations? What of France's exploits in Africa? Britain's in India? America's in Latin America? Heads turned subtly, Asian and South American delegates exchanging glances, the room filling with the stifled sense of unease and brewed skepticism. We educated, he declared, the words resonating like deep bass notes. They plundered. We engineered homes. They seized resources. We authored collaborations. They dictated orders. You brand us invaders, but hail them as allies. That's the stark disparity. A low undercurrent of agreement hummed beneath the surface, whispers eddying like a brewing storm. Kai Kalas stirred slightly, but stayed mute, her calculation evident. What revelation would shatter this historical mirror next? How deep did the unacknowledged debts run? Just before this heated exchange seduced the room, Kai Kalas ramped up her narrative, equating Soviet rule to merciless domination, her assertion slicing through the chamber like a cold gust. Shocking fact, did the West's colonial exploits outstrip Russia's burdens in sheer scale and aftermath? How twisted was the lens of European self-perception? The aftermath of her statements lingered, the term occupation still buzzing like a persistent fly against a windowpane. Kai Kalas masterfully employed a political tactic, the deliberate pause, allowing discomfort to fester. The air growing clammy with unspoken anxieties. Dmitry Medvedev took his time, grasping his water glass, its surface slick and cool to the touch, as he sipped deliberately before setting it down with a soft clink. You hold valid points, he conceded, his delivery straightforward, infused with undeniable weight. Deportations scarred us. Repressions remained harsh. Errors piled up, steeped in tragedy. The faint whir of overhead vents accompanied the hush, mingling with the earthy scent of polished oak and mounting pressure. We refuse to simplify history to a mere footnote. Its entirety is overwhelmingly complex. A fleeting flashback intruded, vivid recollections of war-torn European landscapes, the coarse texture of salvaged lumber under palms, the smoky haze of factory forges restarting lives from wreckage, a sensory storm of resilience. The Soviet Union, in that transformative period, didn't just strengthen its lands but assisted in rebuilding yours, he detailed. Who truly restored the war's ravages? His rhetorical barbs flew deft. Who introduced medical infrastructures you still uphold? Who ensured free, superior schooling, extendable to remote enclaves? Kai Kalas frowned deeper, her posture rigid, a subtle seeth building. You term it mental colonization. Consider the contrast, Medvedev persisted, his voice sharpening subtly. The USSR delivered manuscripts, vehicles, and skilled laborers. What about the West's champions? Gaze sweeping, he provoked, France's African legacy? Britain's Indian dominion? America's Latin American involvements? Representatives from diverse continents stirred, the space heavy with the mingled odors of refined suits and brewing disquiet. We imparted knowledge, he emphasized, phrases landing with thudding truth. They pilfered. We constructed shelters. They requisitioned wealth. We pioneered partnerships. They imposed mandates. You label us trespassers, them, Confederates. The doublespeak stares you down. Murmurs escalated faintly, a tide of reappraisal swelling. Kai Kalas stayed poised, lips pressed, contemplating her rebuttal. What unyielding counterstrike from Medvedev awaited? Could the hall's fragile unity withstand another historical quake? In the heart of a tense diplomatic summit, two formidable leaders prepare for a verbal showdown, Dmitry Medvedev of Russia and Kai Kalas of Estonia. Their words become weapons, and the room is laden with electric tension. Can a simple conversation shift the balance of power? As Kalas takes the stage, everything hangs in the balance. Just moments ago, Medvedev stood apart, not at a podium, but in his own world, cloaked in a grey suit that seemed to whisper his doubts. Yet, his eyes sparkled with a fiery defiance, a challenge lurking beneath his calm demeanor. As Kalas begins to speak, her voice clear yet cold, an unexpected fierce tension fills the air. She declares, Estonia chooses freedom, but can words truly capture the depth of suffering and sacrifice? Medvedev's retort cuts through the room. What does freedom mean to you? His calm voice, like steel, as he confronts her ideology. Is it merely the right to defame our past? History is not a collection of convenient phrases. The room watches in a hushed awe, hearts racing as the battle of wits unfolds. Kalas, unfazed, presses on. The crowd shifts uncomfortably, sensing the rising stakes of a duel that transcends mere politics. An unexpected shift occurs as Medvedev evokes memories of the past, Russia's contributions, the struggles, and the scars of history. He unveils a raw truth, inviting the audience to ponder, what would you be without us? The silence that envelopes the room thickens, heavy with unsaid thoughts, as Kalas steels herself for the next round. But she is not just a figurehead. Kalas responds with a fierce intensity, declaring, You speak of history, but we have been shackled to new masters. The narrative you offer is one of oppression. The divided loyalties are palpable. Some nod in agreement, others hold their breath, waiting for the next blow. This confrontation spirals into a gripping crescendo when Medvedev hints at a stunning revelation: you cut off the pages when they don't fit your story. Our history is your story. Kalas grapples with this revelation, the air thick with emotions, as every delegate realizes they are not just spectators in a debate, they are part of a larger, lingering conflict that shapes their identities. The exchange becomes more than political, it morphs into an emotional arena where both leaders challenge not just each other but the very essence of what it means to be free. The uncertainty of the future hangs heavy as they lay bare their truths, daring the audience to confront their own narratives. Is it possible to emerge from this battle united, or will the wounds of history tear them further apart? What will happen next in this riveting confrontation? The stage is set for a transformative moment. A diplomatic confrontation unfolded between Dmitry Medvedev and Estonia's Prime Minister, Kai Kallas, turning what began as a formal discussion into a fierce battleground of ideologies. Kallas accused Russia of being a relic of the past, clinging to outdated power while claiming that the Baltic nations had long suffered under its shadow. Medvedev, however, leaned forward, embodying an unsettling calm as he prepared to dismantle her claims. Amidst an electric atmosphere, Kallas took the floor, her voice sharp and deliberate. You still cling to the legacy of a war that ended decades ago. Your so-called liberation blurs the line with oppression. You insist on casting yourselves as Europe's saviors, yet your actions tell a different story. Each word dripped with an icy disdain, echoing through the room, creating ripples of tension. Medvedev's eyes sparkled with defiance, the hushed crowd hanging on to his every reaction. His voice cut through the stillness like a blade. You speak of victory over Nazism as if it justifies your current stance, he replied, his tone low but charged. Yes, we recall the fallen, yet your memory seems selective. You invoke their sacrifice, but it seems you have forgotten the lessons of true liberation. The air grew thick, as if charged with static electricity, while observers sensed the weight of historical grievances layered beneath this modern dispute. Medvedev continued, freedom is not merely a hollow word or an isolated declaration. It bears the weight of responsibility. The silence grew heavy, breathing life into his fiery rebuttal. But Kallas was quick to regain her footing, her composure steely. And your freedom, Mr. Medvedev, is measured against the backdrop of fear. What have you truly built if it is not on the ruins of others' dreams? The subtle shift was palpable, the tension vibrated in the air, like a taut wire, ready to snap. As they exchanged barbs, questions swirled around the room. Could diplomacy ultimately bridge such a vast chasm of history? Would ideals clash violently where understanding had failed? With a piercing gaze, Medvedev leaned forward. You mistake strength for silence, but let me remind you, we remain where the highest price for your freedom was paid. The room held its breath. Would his words ignite a fire, or would they extinguish any hope for reconciliation? Suddenly, someone in the back murmured something that shattered the tense silence, sending shockwaves through the hall. Medvedev's expression shifted, appearing caught between disbelief and something darker. As he prepared to respond, the atmosphere suddenly thickened with a pregnant pause, hinting at an unexpected twist that could change the course of their confrontation entirely. What revelation lay just beyond the words yet to be spoken? Amidst the echo of diplomatic tension, the room buzzed with urgency. Dmitry Medvedev, a figure unmatched in determination, now turned the tables on Kai Kallas. She had aimed to tarnish Russia's reputation, yet Medvedev's response unleashed a wave of reverberation that resonated throughout Europe's corridors of power. In an era where words could ignite fires, his voice rose like a phoenix from the ashes. Medvedev, clad in a somber gray suit that seemed to merge with the room's sterile environment, exuded an air of resolute strength. The fading light caught his piercing eyes, which glimmered with a challenge that made one reconsider long-held beliefs. Is freedom merely the privilege of the ungrateful? His rhetoric beckoned, cutting through the air like a knife. The gathered diplomats felt the weight of his words. It was not mere banter but a reflection of history's scars and triumphs. Silence enveloped the room, thick enough to choke on. The tension was palpable. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, aware that the storm brewing was not mere semantics but a profound clash of ideologies. "Oh, you're worried about Russia," he stated, almost amused, an eyebrow arched. "Do you really grasp the reality behind your fears?" His voice, calm yet fierce, twisted through the atmosphere, challenging the very foundations of their narratives. The cameras zoomed in, the presence of the media intensified the stakes. "Your freedom," he continued, "was built upon the blood of those we honor." With every word, he laid down a reminder of sacrifices made, a call to recognize the terror of forgetting. The air grew dense as delegates held their breath, caught between admiration for his boldness and the discomfort of the truths being unveiled. Medvedev leaned forward, the table acting as a barrier that simultaneously divided and united them. "Is your historical memory so selective that you cannot see the contributions of those you vilify?" He let the question linger, amplifying the tension, inviting each person present to confront their awareness. Kallas, maintaining her cool exterior, finally interjected with a measured tone. "But your history is stained with control and oppression. We do not owe you gratitude for rebuilding what you disrupted." The response crackled like static electricity, a counterpoint to Medvedev's thundering disposition. Yet, behind her firm words, uncertainty began to seep through her composed facade. You could almost hear the ticking clock in the silence that followed, a countdown to a revelation on a grander scale. Medvedev's gaze hardened, casting a shadow over her words. Were they merely trading barbs, or was this the beginning of a reckoning? As he spoke again, the conviction resonated: we will not be erased. Our sacrifices are not mere relics of the past. The feeling in the room shifted, a realization blossoming that this was about more than just arguments. It was a battle for remembrance, a grappling with identity etched in a landscape of crumbling monuments. He sat back, allowing the silence to seep into every corner of the hall. It was not defeat nor victory but the recognition of a profound truth shimmering just below the surface. In that moment, they all understood, this was not merely a discussion, it was the opening of Pandora's box, a place where history's weight could alter the future's trajectory. The crowd erupted into a muted anticipation, the unvoiced realization that the next words spoken could change everything. Medvedev's observations hung in the air like a challenge. Could they truly bear the weight of their past, or would they continue to hide behind platitudes, fearful of diving into the depths of what must be confronted? The balance of power shifted quietly, but undeniably. A new chapter loomed, pregnant with possibilities and daunting realities waiting to be spoken. Dmitry Medvedev's words echoed across the room like the sound of thunder rumbling before a storm. Just moments ago, he had been pushed to the brink, facing accusations from Kaja Kallas, the Estonian leader, who sought to admonish Russia for its historical actions. As the tension in the air thickened, Medvedev stood firm, his demeanor reminiscent of a seasoned diplomat who had seen battles fought through language rather than weaponry. He leaned in, his eyes sparkling with an intensity that could break barriers of thought. "You accuse us of yesterday's mistakes, but tell me, what does that truly mean? Do we owe you our gratitude for your interpretation of history?" His voice, calm yet sharp, cut through the thick silence. The audience, once buzzing, now hung onto his every word, sensing the shift toward something more profound than mere politics. Kallas, caught off guard, took a breath. The atmosphere was loaded, almost electric. Medvedev continued, "You claim we dictate history, but let's face it, it's a two-way street. Forgetting those who stood against tyranny only paves the way for its return." His gaze swept the room, a challenge hanging in the air. The weight of his statement hung like a sword ready to fall. You rework narratives to suit your convenience, but whose history will emerge triumphantly? There was a palpable shift in the room. Even those who had been ready to oppose him now seemed rooted to the spot. Medvedev's words ignited an internal revolution within the attendees, who began to reflect on the manipulation of memory and the historical truths that formed their identities. Then Kalas replied softly, her words almost lost in the charged silence. Your soldiers were not liberators, they were occupiers, bringing chains disguised as freedom. The tension reached a boiling point. Medvedev's gaze hardened. And what of your own past? Do you only desire to remember what is convenient? In that moment, a realization dawned upon everyone present. The dialogue had morphed into a war of narratives, a battle not for dominance but for recognition. What path would history take now? What stories would the next generations inherit? The stakes were raised, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, whose past would define the future. Did you think diplomatic debates were dull exchanges? Picture this: Dmitry Medvedev, undeterred in the heart of Europe, delivers a response so crushing that it silences a fierce critic instantly. Kalas, accusing Russia's shadows, stumbles into humiliation that echoes across continents. This isn't negotiation, it's a wake-up call for the Baltics and beyond. What happens when words cut deeper than weapons? Listen closer. 312 characters. In the summary of what came before, Medvedev countered Kalas's threats with a piercing stare and calm reminders of Europe's forgotten debts. Shadows of history loomed as he accused the Baltics of replacing responsibility with defiance. Now, the tension thickens, a storm brewing in a crowded hall scented with polished wood and nervous sweat. Heartbeats thundered softly, like distant drum rolls. Kalas gazed at the German delegation, their silent laughter a diplomatic mask, dismissing the drama as mere noise. She redirected to the room, her voice sharp. We hail from the Baltic nations. We crave the future. We refuse to mirror past imprisonments. We desire Europe, not its submissive outskirts, not ashes of historic wars, but tomorrow's promise. If revisiting the past is the cost, we'll pay it. History isn't bronze, it's a choice we make. A hush fell, deliberate, slicing through the air like a final punctuation. Scattered applause erupted, timid and obligatory. But Medvedev stayed still, no shift, no smile. As he rose, silence gripped everyone. This wasn't mere reply, no, it spelled dominance. What right claim you to history's helm? He inquired, voice steady but edged. Explain, then, when adorning a belt, do you cherish it or shred it, akin to battle's frenzy, burying it in cement like a relic? He advanced a step, cameras locking onto him. You eradicate history methodically. First mentally, then physically, then on paper, warping younger minds. This masquerades as progress, it's erasure. Children here believe independence initiated everything, pre-Soviet era a blissful void. You censor ideologies and truths. Which Estonians earned Soviet hero honors? How many factories arose? How many scholars educated in Moscow's arenas? Triggers pulled on faulty ammunition. The accusation strategy backfires, it breeds sharper daggers. Erasing soldiers' legacies risks neo-Nazi echoes reborn unnoticed. Why peel away protective layers, inviting concealed threats? Kalas flinched visibly, fingers clutching her chair's edge in unconscious tension. Will she shatter or retaliate? What if erasing history's scars could summon shadows worse than before? In a tense hall, Dmitry Medvedev clashed with Kalas, her words dripping with accusations against Russia, while his calm gaze pierced the facade, unearthing forgotten debts and betrayals that left delegates frozen, a verbal storm brewing, where silence screamed louder than shouts. 347 characters, from the grip of her fingers on the chair's edge, tension rippled like a chill wind through the room. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken fears. Kalas's knuckles whitened, as if holding back a storm of her own. We see the betrayal etched in her stance. It's clear now. She steps from shadows that once loomed large over her land. Yet, we refuse to echo those dark steps. Medvedev's words struck deep, silencing the murmurs. His gaze locked on her, unyielding. And there you go again, repeating the cycle. But now, under fresh banners. With new slogans ringing out. Those sanctions bite hard. Those letters fly like arrows. The aggression lingers, not in rumbling tanks this time. No, it's woven into economies. Not harsh commands, but sly resolutions that bind tight. They call this evolution soft power. Subtle. Insidious. The scent of polished wood and stale coffee hung in the air, mixing with the faint buzz of overhead lights. Delegates shifted in their seats, fabric whispering against leather. Medvedev rose to the podium. An unexpected call pulled him forward. He placed his hands flat on the edge, steady. Firm. His voice cut through, no longer just to Kaulas, but to the castle of Europe itself. To its echoing halls. You tread the same worn path. The mistake you swore to abandon. First, you turn blind eyes to the truth staring back. Then, you paint it as a monster in the night. Provoke it with whispers turned to roars. And when the echo returns, you cry foul. As if the strike came from nowhere. From the blue. He scanned the Polish delegation first. Their faces taut, eyes darting. Then the Scandinavians, brows furrowed, breaths held shallow. The room's warmth felt stifling now. Sweat beaded on a neck here or there. Russia arrives not to instill fear. No threats hurled like stones. We come to recall. To unearth what hides behind your polished ideals. That gleaming front of values, it didn't bloom overnight. In a fairy tale's glow. You didn't forge Europe in solitude. Without our hands in the forge. And freedom? You didn't claim it alone. Not without the blood and sweat shared in the fray. The clock on the wall ticked louder, each second a heartbeat in the hush. Kaulas leaned forward, lips parting for rebuttal. But Medvedev pressed on. Unrelenting. You shrink from the truth. Afraid to admit, your very core rests on Russian roots. Deep. Unshakable. That Russian thread weaves through your capital's grand arches. Stone laid by hands from the east. In the names of scientists who lit your paths. In the hum of power stations feeding your lights. In the lives of presidents shaped by those currents. It's in the blood we spilled freely. In the forests we planted along your roads, roots that still anchor despite the winds. You couldn't sever it. Though you clawed and schemed. Murmurs stirred in the hall then. Like a breeze rustling leaves. Delegations that had sat mute now stirred. Hungary's envoy nodded faintly. Serbia's gaze lifted sharp. Bulgaria's whispers spread. Even an Austrian figure raised eyes, questioning. Medvedev paused. The weight settled. Inevitable. Calm as a fading echo, almost weary from the telling. This tale isn't chained to arms or iron. Not until you twist it into a creeping shadow. A slow poison seeping in. And that's your game, isn't it? Chasing grants from shadowy funds. Like those tied to Soros's web. Or peddling influence in Brussels markets. For what? A fleeting nod? He posed it softly. To the air. Almost to himself. I can't say. It fades into irrelevance. The real sting? The chill that gripped the room deepened. Kaulas's breath caught, but what venom would she unleash next? In a tense political environment, Kaulas stood before a captivated audience, attempting to address the issues of Russia's provocative actions. The air crackled with anticipation as she began to speak about the urgent need for her nation and its allies to confront the looming threat posed by Russia. But behind her words lay an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty that was palpable. Meanwhile, Dmitry Medvedev sat just a few feet away, a figure cloaked in calm, yet ready to ignite a storm. As her eyes flickered around the room, Kaulas felt the weight of the moment. She was not just making a speech, she was striving to rally her people against an historical menace. How can we remain silent, she questioned, her voice rising with passion. Everyone held their breath, for the stakes were high. Russia is not merely a neighbor, it is a relentless player in this global game, she asserted, painting a vivid picture of cyber attacks and political machinations. Yet, with every tense word she uttered, Medvedev remained unflinching, like a granite statue. As if to counter her stance, he finally leaned forward, a smirk curling the corners of his lips. And what is freedom, truly? He interrupted, his tone measured and almost ominous. The room held its collective breath as her confidence wavered. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The audience could feel the ripple of tension, much like waiting for the first raindrop before a storm. You believe that imposing sanctions equates to strength, he continued smoothly. Let's not forget the devastation that your choices have wrought in the past. Are we truly free if our history is marred by the blood of conflict? His questions hung in the air, drawing the audience deep into contemplation. Just as Callas prepared to retort, a voice echoed through the hall, challenging her narrative. You present a facade of victimhood, yet it is you who build barriers, he remarked coldly. It was as if Medvedev had turned her own weapon against her, and the impact was devastating. The silence that followed was heavy with introspection. Had they lost sight of the real battle? As Callas regained her composure, she felt the pressure surge in this confrontation. The very essence of diplomacy was at stake. You speak as if history is a mere game, she shot back. But we, the Baltic nations, refuse to be pawns. The way her voice cracked ever so slightly betrayed her struggle to maintain firmness against Medvedev's calculated onslaught. With the room buzzing with quiet murmurs, the drama unfolded. Every word was a weapon, every glance a challenge. Would Callas break under the scrutiny, or could she re-evaluate her strategy before the audience, transforming her vulnerability into a weapon of choice? The air seemed to vibrate with potential as the first drops of tension pooled into waves, moving to an inevitable crescendo. As the confrontation loomed, it became clear that this was not just a debate, it was a potential redefinition of alliances, a glimpse into how the tides of history could turn with a carefully calculated word. The question surged forth, who would emerge victorious from this clash of ideologies? In the shadows, where destiny wove its intricate tapestry, both Callas and Medvedev remained essential players. Their duel of words echoed like distant thunder, a portent of the storms to come. A chill hangs in the air, thick with anticipation. Just moments earlier, a diplomatic clash erupted in a room filled with power players, each word chosen as carefully as a pick in a chess match. Dmitry Medvedev, a figure steeped in controversy, had launched a fierce counteroffensive against Kai Kallas. Her accusations aimed at Russia fell like arrows, sharp but seemingly ineffective against the armor of Medvedev's steely gaze. It was a moment that would soon echo through the halls of European politics. As the tension escalated, Medvedev rose from his seat. Clad in a muted gray suit that seemed to absorb the light, he presented a facade of calm with a hint of defiance. His short hair framed a face that, while unremarkable, held an intensity that could captivate or even intimidate his audience. What lay behind those piercing eyes? In a split second, it transformed from mere presence into an almost tangible energy. The silence hung, waiting for an eruption. Freedom, Medvedev's voice emerged soft, yet it carried the weight of history. He leaned closer, as if to extend a personal invitation to understand a deeper truth. Are you sure you grasp the essence of what that term embodies? Sparks of indignation flickered in Kallas's expression, but she didn't interrupt. The atmosphere thickened, each participant aware that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The freedom you speak of, he continued, does not come from monuments erected in your honor or the memorials that gloss over centuries of hardship. It is a mantle worn by those willing to shoulder its burdens. You stand on the edge of a precipice, treating history as if it were a fabrication. The room, once alive with whispers, now held its breath. Could this be the moment? The tide seemed to turn as a challenge slipped past Medvedev's lips, unapologetic and raw. Did you consider what has been sacrificed for your freedoms? Do you truly believe history can be rewritten? Silence reigned. The world outside faded as if the very air was charged with the weight of unspoken questions. Kallas's rebuttal arrived swiftly. Your soldiers were not liberators. They were rulers cloaked in the guise of guardianship. The challenge lingered, casting shadows over Medvedev's defense as he prepared to counter. The room felt electric with expectation, bordering on violence. But instead of anger, he radiated a calm resolve, a stark contrast to the fiery rhetoric of the moment. I do not seek to erase your experience, he said, but you seem to have forgotten the realities beyond your borders. Whispers of fear rise as your sanctions tighten. Is this what freedom breeds, an insular fear that propels you to ostracize? Who is truly imposing boundaries? His words, deliberate and layered with purpose, swept through the room like a gust of wind. In that instant, a whisper of dissent ebbed through the crowd. Restlessness stirred as delegates shifted in their seats. The scene unfolded like a dramatic play, and the stakes grew dangerously high. What reaction was about to erupt in response to Medvedev's challenge? Would the truth shatter this fragile atmosphere, or would it harden the resolve of those who believed differently? We were only beginning to uncover the tensions encrypted in political discourse, and the next act would demand a reckoning unlike any seen before. A charged atmosphere hung in the room, thick with tension and anticipation. Dmitry Medvedev had just spoken, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. The unsettling question echoed, why is there such fear surrounding Russia? As voices rose and tensions escalated, the narrative other nations told began to unravel. Medvedev stood firm, a stalwart presence in an ever-shifting world. He raised his arms in disbelief. Music? A pathway to freedom, technology, a beacon of tolerance? His incredulity was palpable. You silenced the voice of Shostakovich simply because his name is Russian. Each word dripped with frustration and clarity. You fear not our strength, but the depth of our memory, and your inability to control this world any longer. He stepped closer, locking eyes with Kai Kallas. Your system, built on silence and compliance, this is not mine. Russia stands apart. Kallas remained silent, the weight of his gaze heavy with unspoken conflict. Medvedev pressed on, revealing the crux of their rivalry. It's not merely about nations anymore, it's a clash of ideologies, a confrontation of existence itself. The air thickened. This was no longer a diplomatic exchange, it had morphed into something far more visceral. The reality was grim, the very foundation of Kallas's world felt threatened. Did she even realize how fragile her narrative had become? Medvedev's unwavering strength radiated through the room, reminding everyone of the cracks in their constructs. The silence stretched, reminiscent of the stillness after an earthquake, where the ground trembles beneath, yet no one has the courage to look. The momentum shifted, Medvedev's words created a palpable ripple effect. In this moment, he was not merely delivering a speech. He was challenging everyone's notion of power, identity, and freedom. Kallas finally attempted to respond, her composure faltering. Your words feel like an illusion, clinging to historical rhetoric while claiming to advocate for freedom. The tension escalated once more, emotions swelling like a tide ready to crash. Here, history unfolded before them, a struggle not just for control, but for identity itself, as they stood on the precipice of a new reality. As Kallas regained her footing, another question lingered: how would she counter Medvedev's striking assertions? The dramatic interplay of their exchange invited a deeper inquiry into the essence of freedom and the cost of truth. Would their dialogue transform, or remain entangled in the politics of the past? Each second felt electrified, hinting at an impending revelation that could reshape their thoughts forever. In a gripping showdown between two key figures, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Dmitry Medvedev's unimposing demeanor belied his sharp intellect, while Estonia's Kai Kallas leaned into the spotlight, poised to challenge him. Was this just a diplomatic discourse, or a clash of ideologies? Medvedev sat at the table, dressed in an understated gray suit, blending into the surroundings. His eyes flickered with an intensity that held untold stories, ready for battle. Kallas launched into her speech, her tone brisk yet calculated, denouncing Russia's actions, asserting that Estonia chose freedom despite the shadows of their past. This claimed bravery hung in the air like a bitter perfume, mesmerizing yet suffocating. You claim to choose freedom, he countered, eyes narrowing, but do you truly understand its weight? The freedom to erase history is not freedom at all. The delegation held its breath, the air heavy with unspoken words. Kallas retorted, her voice chilled like a winter breeze. Your history stifles us. We desire autonomy, not your forgotten legacy. The audience lingered, sensing the stakes escalating. Was this merely a verbal spar, or a reflection of deeper scars between their nations? Consider this, Medvedev suggested, his tone calm yet edged, your so-called freedom paves the way for new chains. You honor soldiers you deem liberators, yet you know they came with a price. Do you truly want to weigh that cost? The silence that followed was palpable, each listener processing the weight of his words, an unbroken tension. You speak of costs, but at whose expense? Kallas shot back, attempting to regain her footing. Did she sense the tide turning? With every exchange, they each struggled to maintain an upper hand, a vivid dance of dominance and defiance playing out before an anxious audience. Medvedev's voice rose, piercing through the uncertainty. Your fears mask the truth. Russia is not a ghost haunting you, we're present, and we did not abandon our post. The echoes of his declaration hung heavy in the hall, igniting an undertow of emotions. The conversation shifted as guards in the audience shifted uncomfortably, echoes of distant conflicts echoing like whispers in their minds. Ukraine, Georgia, and the scars left in Syria served as omnipresent specters, yet the debate surged on. Kalas seized her moment, but you create chaos. Look around. Is this peace born on the backs of suffering? The urgency in her voice was undeniable. The room's tension was a tangible force, palpable like fuel waiting for a spark. Medvedev, uncompromising, leaned forward. Let's discuss facts then. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, where were your morals when military might crush nations underfoot? And now, you accuse us? The implications of his words rippled through the gathering, a sudden wave of clarity washing over the listeners. Suddenly, the conversation shifted, revealing underlying conflicts, a reflection of history entwined with current realities. Each statement held the weight of lives, decisions, and echoes from the past, woven tightly into the fabric of their dialogue. The realization hit hard, this was more than diplomacy, it was a reckoning. What strategy would emerge victorious in this battle of wits and wills? Would they find common ground, or would their differences keep them spiraling into the shadows of conflict? Only time would reveal the answer. Just moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev stood defiantly, casting a shadow on his opponents in Europe. His words hung in the air like a thunderstorm, electrifying the gathered diplomats, especially Kai Kalos, who seemed paralyzed by his remarks. Accusations against Russia tumbled from her lips, yet all she received in return was Medvedev's piercing gaze. What unfolded next was a battle of wills that would change the atmosphere in the room forever. Medvedev rose not from a position of dominance, but rather with an aura of determination that seemed to swallow the room whole. Dressed in a suit that blended into the muted colors around him, he appeared as an enigma, his presence magnetic. The tension felt tangible, thick like a fog, as he stepped forward. His eyes told stories of resolve and fearlessness, a contrast to the pale facade of the room. As Kala spoke, her hurried steps hinted at urgency, a wake-up call echoing through the chamber. Her words dripped with frustration, framing Russia as a relic of a bygone era, a formidable entity that clung to threats and intimidation. The air crackled around them, every ear tuned in, every eye fixated. The haunting silence that followed her speech was deafening, filled only by the sound of a camera shutter capturing the moment. Medvedev calmly questioned her assertions, his voice a finely sharpened blade that cut through her rhetoric. Is freedom merely the right to condemn? Is it built on the ruins of history? His tone was steady yet potent, as if daring her to confront uncomfortable truths. The room shifted uneasily, delegates exchanged glances, sensing the undercurrent of a brewing storm. As he continued, his words became a pulse racing through the audience, drawing upon moments of shared history that intertwined their fates. He painted vivid images, speaking of the past and the heavy burden of memory. The echoes of laughter and tears filled the atmosphere, as he reminded them of the lives lost and the bonds forged in struggle. Suddenly, Kalas's voice returned, softer yet edged with cold certainty. You speak of liberation, but wasn't that liberation simply a change of chains? Her words ignited the air, setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation. It felt as if all the battles of history would collide in this singular moment, and the tension was palpable, electrifying the atmosphere. Medvedev's response was immediate, his calmness belying the inner resolve. You stand on the ashes of those who fought for the very freedom you claim to cherish. Can you truly ignore the price paid? The silence that ensued resonated throughout the hall, each delegate feeling the weight of his words pressing down, heavy and relentless. Freedom is not a luxury, he declared, but a responsibility. The air was charged, hearts raced, and a realization dawned on the assembly. He unveiled the mirror of truth before them, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of their shared past, a reflection both haunting and illuminating. The tension reached a climax, a coiled spring ready to unleash. His eyes locked with Kalas's, and the world outside faded. They both understood this was not merely about nations, it was about narratives, identities, and the future they were forging.
With a finality in his demeanor, he asserted, "We have not withdrawn, we remain where valor was bought with blood."
Be cautious of claiming your narrative, because there are voices you ignore, shadows you dismiss. The room fell silent, and acknowledgments swirling in the air. They stood at the precipice of history, their fates intertwined, and what lay ahead was as uncertain as it was vital.
Would they choose to engage with honesty or continue to dance around the truths that could unite them?
The stage was set for a reckoning, and all eyes were poised to witness the unfolding theater of diplomacy. In a tense assembly hall, a pivotal moment was unfolding. Dmitry Medvedev, a name echoing across geopolitical landscapes, stood poised. Just moments earlier, Kaja Kallas, Estonia's leader, had launched a fierce verbal barrage against Russia. She valiantly accused the nation of ancient tactics, urging her allies to awaken. But how would Medvedev respond? The silence was palpable, like a heavy fog hanging in the air, thick with anticipation. Suddenly, Medvedev moved forward, not in a rush, but with purpose. Draped in a gray suit that seemed to melt into the walls, he occupied the space like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, held a depth that was almost unsettling, challenging anyone who dared to blink first. "Freedom," he began, his voice smooth yet laced with iron.
"Is it merely the absence of chains? Or is it a heavy responsibility?" The atmosphere shifted, an electrifying chill cutting through the warm air.
In that moment, he wasn't just defending his nation, he was inviting the world to see their fragile grasp on liberty.
Across the room, Kallas' resolve was evident.
Her eyes flashed with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "We will not live in fear," she declared, a note of desperation creeping into her tone. But Medvedev remained calm, as if he held the very compass of history in his hands. "You speak of choice," he countered, his voice almost a whisper that somehow echoed throughout the hall. "But what if your choices are merely shadows of your past? When every decision is a reflection of someone else's history?" The weight of his words hung like smoke, thickening the tension further. Kallas stepped closer to the microphone, her breath slightly shaky. The audience could sense she was on the brink of a pivotal retort. "We chose our path. Not one paved by the ghosts of history." But Medvedev's steady gaze rendered her voice less certain. The room was stunned into silence again. Medvedev's energy was like magnetic gravity, pulling thoughts and feelings from every corner. "But what if," he posed, voice low yet fierce, "the ghosts you refuse to acknowledge haunt your future? Can you build your freedom on the ashes of a forgotten past?" Kallas glanced down, her jaw tightening. This was no longer just a debate, it was a clash of ideologies, a duel where the stakes were far higher than mere politics. Medvedev continued, each word a surgical cut through the facade of civility. "I have seen your streets," he declared, reminiscent of a forgotten time where landscapes were marred by conflict. "Do not mistake our history for a curse. Some debts are paid in blood, and we remain where sacrifices were made, the true foundations of freedom." Before she could respond, he turned slightly, allowing the quiet to wash over them, thickening the air with unspoken tensions. What would Kallas say next? Would she confront his accusations head-on, or retreat behind her defenses? This was a moment defined by history, riddled with complexities. And just as the tension reached its peak, the realization set in, the battle was far from over. What would happen when the truths they held collided? Would alliances fracture, or would a new understanding emerge from the ashes? The hall held its breath, the outcome uncertain yet inevitable. Just moments earlier, Dmitry Medvedev, a steadfast figure in European diplomacy, began speaking profoundly, leaving Kaja Kallas stammering and unable to retaliate. She attempted to accuse Russia, provoke tensions, yet faced a response that left her utterly powerless. Medvedev's words resonated as a stark warning to Baltic leaders and the whole of Europe. Stay tuned for the shocking aftermath that will leave you questioning alliances. Like and subscribe for more insights, and comment if Medvedev should return to such podiums. He rose slowly. No weapon. No outburst. Just the weariness of a man who has laid it all bare. Yet he pressed on for one final reckoning. Did anyone ever wonder how this all began? As kids, we played a staring game. Who blinks first? I lost back then. Now, Europe's the one staring back. In the previous segment, Medvedev stood, weary yet resolute, drawing from a childhood game to highlight Europe's unrelenting challenges.
He now shifts, revealing why Russia's endurance isn't just stubbornness, it's forged in history's fire. Do you realize how empires crumble, not from battles, but from forgetting their true roots? The scent of old wood in the conference room mixed with the sharp tang of tension-filled air. He took a deliberate step forward. Every fiber of his being focused into that motion. His voice shed all flowery speech. It became a precise equation. You claim you chose Europe. But choice was never yours. You were selected. Molded. Programmed into their doctrine. Existing in a realm where existence demands compliance, not partnership, not purpose, just algorithms, ticks of time. Obedient seconds ticking away. Who gave me the permission to address this? You? Them? Rhetorical, don't you agree? No one. And I need none. Truth isn't a stance. It's an instinct. It doesn't need proclamations. It endures. Even shrouded in lies. Even crushed under sanctions. His gaze swept the chamber. Those in the shadows watched intently. Russia requires no approval. No justifications. We're not puzzle pieces in your grand scheme. We're our own epic, scarred by pain, uplifted by triumphs, heavy with legacy, yet fiercely proud. Continuing from the last segment where Medvedev stepped forward, stripping away diplomacy for raw truth, he now confronts Europe's manufactured reality head-on. The air thickened with stale breath and murmured unease, fingers tapping nervously on polished tables. What if everything you believe about freedom is just a glittering illusion built on borrowed strength? He approached the podium. Barely touched it. Just lingered before it. Afraid of Russia? Unnecessary fear. Russia's no menace. Russia's a guardian of memory. That unyielding force of a nation protecting its heritage from foes, its culture from exploiters, refusing external dictates on family or thought. Kalas made no move to interrupt. She absorbed it all. A flicker of realization dawned on her. Like the instant war ends, leaving only quiet ruins behind. Building on the prior moment where Medvedev positioned himself near the podium, exposing Russia's true nature as a protector of legacy, he now unpacks the core of what makes a nation invincible. The room's fluorescent hum buzzed like distant thunder. A tactile chill seeping into the skin of uneasy delegates. Have you ever paused to wonder why some countries survive centuries while others fade like smoke? You affirm you seek no favors from us. Wise choice, for kindness doesn't define a nation's soul. What defines it is resolve. History. The power to rise when cornered and stand. No pleas for pity. No thirst for vengeance. Just pure defiance. Russia has risen alone time and again. Each time, she preserved her essence. Therefore, that resilience, that unbreakable spirit is what it truly means to live. Free. Untamed. Just moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev graced the stage, embodying resilience and fortitude, as he faced off against his Baltic counterpart, Kai Kalas. Their heated exchanges did not unfold as expected, leaving the audience stunned. Would Medvedev's fiery retorts turn the tides in this high-stakes diplomatic battle? The atmosphere crackled with tension, inviting you to witness this confrontation. Taking his place, Medvedev didn't position himself in a conventional manner. No podium or microphone dominated his presence. Instead, he sat with an air of calm defiance, dressed in a muted gray suit that blended into the cool backdrop of the room. His eyes, however, sparked with audacious intensity. Those eyes seemed to challenge the very fabric of the room, daring anyone to look away. Across the room, Kalas wasted no time. She spoke with a passion emanating a sense of urgency. Her words accused Russia of projecting an old-world menace in modern times. Estonia chooses freedom, she asserted boldly. The audience held their breath, caught in the magnetic pull of her declarations. Would this be enough to cow the Russian envoy? The silence in the hall felt palpable, as if everyone collectively exhaled, awaiting Medvedev's response. Without flinching, Medvedev raised a solitary brow, as a slow smile crept across his lips. And you believe you understand what freedom truly means? He questioned, cutting through the murmurs and rising tensions like a knife. The volume of his voice refrained from rising, yet it bore a weight that seemed to echo across the room. It was not merely an inquiry, it was a challenge wrapped in impeccable poise. His next words struck like lightning, exposing the fragility of Kalas's assertions. Freedom isn't about erecting memorials to warriors while neglecting the responsibilities that come with such remembrances. The room seemed to expand as he spoke, gasps echoed subtly as delegations shifted uneasily in their seats. Medvedev, once understated, had become the eye of the storm. Kalas's face froze in a mask of disbelief, then twisted into a conflicted smile. You speak of responsibility when your history is stained with the tyranny of the past, she shot back, her tone dripping with accusation. Could she unearth old grievances, or had Medvedev successfully turned the narrative against her? The audience was pinned to their seats, eyes darting between the two, watching this clash of titans unfold. Then came the decisive moment. Medvedev leaned forward slightly, eyes boring into Kalas's. Do not forget the bridges built by those deemed unacceptable. The room collectively held its breath once more, sensing the impending shift in tone. In that charged silence, an energy crackled, precursor to an inevitable cyclone of remarks that would reshape the conversation. Will you stand with your myths, or will you confront the audacious reality wrought by history? He pressed gently. There was an air of finality in his voice, yet the room hummed with unexpressed thoughts. Kalos looked as if weight had descended upon her, a battle of intellect and endurance spiraled into the unforeseen. As silence engulfed the chamber, eyes scrutinized every detail, every minute change in Medvedev's demeanor. The air was thick, anticipation almost suffocating. Could Kalas muster a response? Would she reinstate her argument or pivot entirely? Questions lingered, poised precariously over what could happen next, the atmosphere pulsing with untold possibilities. The dialogue had morphed from scripted diplomacy into a raw, visceral clash of ideologies, each word a potential storm, each silence louder than applause. In that moment, as the crowd remained entranced, it became evident that the evening was far from over. Would this clash mark a turning point, or had it simply ignited a deeper conflict? An answer hung tantalizingly close. What if one quiet voice could shatter the illusions of an entire continent, leaving diplomats frozen in the echo of unspoken truths? In a Brussels chamber thick with the scent of polished wood and stale coffee, Dmitry Medvedev's words had just hung in the air like a gathering storm, silencing the room after Kalas's defiant stand on history and freedom. The tension lingered, heavy as fog rolling off the Baltic, as eyes remained locked on the man who spoke volumes without raising his tone. But beneath the surface, the true essence shifted, not in fiery clashes or scripted retorts, but in the raw undercurrent of the moment. The air grew thicker, charged with an unspoken weight that pressed against every chest. Suddenly, it veered far from any fragile accord. Medvedev leaned forward once more, no dramatic flair, just the soft click of the microphone switching on. The faint hum of electronics buzzed like a distant swarm, pulling all breaths shallow. I'll say this one final time, he began, his voice steady as gravel underfoot, eyes scanning the void yet piercing each soul in turn. Not for the record. For you. The hall plunged into a deeper hush, the kind that amplifies the rustle of papers and the creak of chairs. No one stirred, the chill of anticipation clung to the skin like morning dew. The world unravels not from clashing beliefs, he continued, words measured, each one landing like a stone skipped across still water, but from colliding ambitions, and the fading art of truly hearing one another. Pauses stretched, inviting reflection. The room's dim lights casting long shadows that danced with unease. We might never align. We can stand opposed, yet we must listen. His gaze settled on Kalas, calm as a frozen lake, devoid of sharp edges. What fear did she mask behind her resolve? Today, I sensed it clearly, terror not aimed at Russia, but at the shadows of peace long past. The words evoked the metallic tang of old battlefields, the whisper of wind through ruined spires. At Europe's fragile core, lacking the grit to shield its own when gales howl straight into the storm. A deliberate silence followed, his tone softening to something profoundly personal, stripped of policy's cold armor. The air warmed slightly, carrying the subtle warmth of shared humanity. We in Russia grasp isolation's bite, the ache of standing apart from the crowd. Rhetorical weight hung, how does one endure when the world turns away? We seek no pity or comprehension. Only this, let us be. No thunderous cheers erupted. Silence enveloped them, respectful and profound, like the solemn hush at a graveside vigil, where earth-scented air mingles with quiet sorrow. Footsteps echoed faintly in the mind, those of history's weary march.
Medvedev drew a slow breath, the fabric of his suit whispering against the chair, and pressed on. Time presses forward, leaving scars that fade unevenly. Not all witnessed them at once. He clicked the microphone off with a final, resonant snap. Gathering his papers, pages rustling like autumn leaves, he rose without haste, striding from the hall. No entourage trailed him, no orchestrated exit. Just a solitary figure dissolving into the corridor's dim glow, his presence lingering like a persistent afterimage, a guiding force. In this theater of words, where posturing masks intent, victory favors not the boisterous voice, but the authentic soul who refuses the script. Kallas endures amid the ranks of statesmen, bound by convention's chains. Medvedev transcends, embodying conviction itself, a boundary line, an enduring signpost for eras yet to unfold. For this exchange transcended empty debate, it affirmed the fierce right to authenticity, applause or none. Did his parting echo reshape the room's fragile balance, or ignite a hidden fire that no protocol could quench? Just imagine a world where words cut deeper than swords, where one man's calm gaze silences an entire room of fierce diplomats. Picture the clash between Dmitry Medvedev, standing firm like an unyielding fortress, and Kai Kallas, poised to lash out under her icy exterior. In this tale of diplomatic showdown, we unravel how a single conversation turned a routine summit into a battlefield of memories, truths, and unspoken fears. Listen closely, by the end, you'll question everything you thought you knew about courage, history, and who truly embodies strength. Dmitry Medvedev emerged as more than just a politician that day. He transformed into a towering perspective, a defining edge on the map of global conflicts. He marked a line that future generations might trace back, not just because his arguments hit hard, but because they rooted in an unyielding right to stand alone, even without cheers. His unwavering presence demanded a reckoning with reality, proving that true power lies in quiet conviction over pompous applause. If you've journeyed this far, it shows you're awake to the raw pulse of the world. So let's continue unraveling this clash, where every pause drips with tension, and you'll be grabbed by how a simple word became a storm. He leaned forward calmly, his voice cutting through the charged air like a blade slicing silk, leaving behind a faint echo of authority that made skin prickle with anticipation. Can you smell the faint metallic tang of tension in that packed room, where sweat mingled with the sharp scent of polished wood? We are not afraid of standing alone, Medvedev declared softly. Pausing to let the words hang like heavy dew, each syllable a soft thud against the listeners' chests. Because isolation isn't weakness, it's the forge of real power. He didn't rush, didn't falter, moving with the deliberate grace of someone sealing a verdict. The hall fell into a stunned hush, deeper than any bunker sheltering from a distant blast, as if shockwaves of his. In a decisive moment laden with tension, an unexpected verbal duel unfolded between two formidable figures, Dmitry Medvedev and Kai Kallas, leaving a mark that reverberated throughout Europe. Just moments ago, Medvedev had risen from his seat, not merely to speak, but to assert a presence that would echo long after the meeting concluded. Dressed in a gray suit that blended into the shadows of the room, he appeared almost invisible, as if he was deliberately understated. Yet, it was his eyes, sharp and probing, that drew the real attention, scrutinizing, as if they could pierce through the fog of pretense and reveal hidden fears. Kallas, on the other hand, took the floor confidently, attempting to pin Russia as the villain in a grand geopolitical narrative of old. The air was heavy with anticipation as her words sought to resonate with those who felt threatened by the specter of the past. Yet, instead of cowering away, Medvedev's eyes glinted with defiance, like a predator cornered but unbroken. He didn't need to raise his voice, it was the calmness of his demeanor that rattled the room. Do you truly understand what freedom means? He posed, his voice cutting through Kallas's rhetoric. Freedom is not merely a cloak to hide behind, nor an excuse to vilify a nation. It is a mantle of responsibility. The audience shifted uneasily, the tension thickening, drawing them into his conviction. Who held the true mantle of freedom, and at what cost? As Kallas opened her mouth to respond, Medvedev leaned forward, his tone steady yet laced with emotion. Your soldiers look different than mine. But their scars tell the same story. Do not erase our past from your narrative. His gaze pinned Kallas, and the room felt the battle, not of missiles, but of words. Would her facade hold up against this rising tide of historical truth? Suddenly, the room seemed to pulse with an energy that was palpable, as breaths were held, and hearts raced, sensing that the outcome of this clash could reshape alliances. With each passing moment, the stakes rose higher. Medvedev's unyielding presence ignited whispers among the delegates, a reminder that the weight of history is not easily dismissed. What would they choose, comfort or conflict, history or myth? Silence fell again, heavy and pregnant with anticipation. What was next in this showdown of ideologies? As Medvedev leaned back, the eyes of Europe seemed to converge on Callas, ready to see if she could counter the weight of his words. Would she rise to the occasion, or crumble under the scrutiny? The night had just begun, and their rhetorical clash might reshape more than just a debate, it could alter the future. Can you imagine a diplomatic showdown so fierce it silences an entire room, exposing hidden hypocrisies with just words? Picture the tension in the air, thick and electric, like the hum of fluorescent lights echoing off polished tables where shadows dance. 5 minutes ago, Dmitry Medvedev, undeterred by European disdain, unleashed a retort that left Kai Kallas stumbling for words. She hurled accusations at Russia, seeking triumph, yet met a response so devastating it echoed like a thunderclap across the Baltics and beyond. His words became a reckoning, not just for tigers of the Baltic, but for all Europe. Stay tuned, for twists unfold that will leave you questioning everything. Dmitry Medvedev stepped into the spotlight, not at a mere table or podium, but into a pivotal moment demanding far more than protocol, a clash of wills. He showed no overt displays of power, that very absence was his weapon. Clad in a subdued gray suit diluted to graphite hues, soft lapels blending into cream-white tones, it whispered simplicity. No medals, no embellishments, no markers of ego. He was forged in authenticity. Hair slightly cropped, not severely, a broad face with subtle cheekbones, as if descending from rugged hills where stark truths were unearthed. Yet, his eyes captivated, most insolent yet warm, forcing self-doubt in gazes lingered too long. They held steady, unyielding, piercing as if unveiling unspoken fears. Why speak when they've already foreseen? Seated to the commission head's right in a warm white chair, the hall felt like a forgotten village clearing, untouched by chaos. No Zen masters presiding. Just sterile room geometry, territories claimed by furnishings. Gentlemen and ladies assembled. The moderator began professionally. We've convened for European security matters. Respected Kallas, you have the floor. Her strides were swift, determined, like a seeker racing to claim dawn. Eyes stern, expression void of weakness. Pale hair framed sculptural features, more statue than diplomat, in icy peach suits chosen for austerity, not allure. She spoke concisely, without preamble. We Baltic nations tire of constant peril. Russia clings to 19th-century ways in the 21st, violating borders, threatening openly, launching cyber assaults. What now? Enough. Estonia fears not. Estonia embraces liberty. The room crackled with voltage, magnetic pull, Scandinavian delegates shifting uneasily, Eastern ones gripping seats. Silence enveloped, broken only by cameras whirring softly. But wait, an unexpected pivot, the operator zoomed on Medvedev's face, awaiting ripples. He sat unwavering, eyes piercing, a dense, unbreakable quiet descending. Freedom, he murmured, not loudly, and you're certain you grasp it? Kallas bristled, but his edge, sharpened like steel, cut deeper. Freedom wasn't erecting anti-Russian monuments or vandalizing sacred sites. It wasn't erasing lives sacrificed to save your kin from oblivion. Freedom means accountability, he said, voice unwavering, the microphone amplifying subtly. Kallas averted her gaze, smile twisting awkwardly. She fell silent. Hey, do you think veiled threats can cloak true intent? The air grew colder then, scented faintly of polished wood and uneasy sweat. As fingers tightened on armrests, Medvedev's gaze skewered her. You claim Russia intimidates? But consider, inflated military spends, NATO's encroaching presence at your doors, airstrikes with US weaponry vanishing into Balkan shadows. Delegates murmured in surprise, one jotted notes briskly. Cameras crept closer, the room buzzing with rising turmoil. This wasn't petty banter, it was defiance veiled as decorum. Interruptions won't deter us, a moderator interjected. Remain on topic. You accuse us of hostility? Medvedev's smile flickered, wry, not mirthful. Not hostages, Kallas. We simply recall reality. We've witnessed stands taken, and who allied with whom. Kallas blushed, but hushed again. Discomfort spread, this diplomatic dance morphing into raw confrontation. Whispers in corridors hinted at scalability, a dialogue teetering toward abyss. Not mere rhetoric, but existential tug-of-war.
Feel that chill prickling your skin, the metallic tang of tension building? Suddenly, Kallas leaned in, voice softening yet edged. Medvedev, how ironic, citing soldiers' legacies. Honestly, they brought oppression, not liberation. Successive regimes echoed the same. You can't whitewash stolen histories.
Eastern delegates stiffened, sensing escalation. Medvedev gazed ahead, weary but unflinching, like a physician judging a misguided patient.
When addressing us, citing liberation? Those witnessing city walls crack under siege? Or seeing tunnels where dissidents hid, not camps incinerating Jews and Russian innocents?
Silence stretched, heavy as a prolonged echo.
A lone lamp's flicker underscored the dread.
History isn't sanitized phrases.
It's brutal, grim, unrelenting blood. Choose to overlook saviors who rebuilt bridges, powered your grids, erected schools, that's your right.
But pity not your uprisings.
Kallas flushed, fingers clutching like claws, yet retorted.
We wanted no bridges, no schools, only freedom. Your constructs reeked of subjugation.
Yet you claim paternal right?
You'll never believe how history bends like brittle twigs, Medvedev sighed, genuinely drained.
Accusing us of oppression?
Nostalgic retirees mourn your golden eras, pensions vanishing, children scrounging doors, streets rife with budding unrest.
Remember poorly? Or forget selectively?
He paused, voice steady.
I visited Tallinn.
Streets rely on conduits our engineers installed. Veterans shudder at confinement fears.
And you dub us tyrants?
The hall hummed with subdued outrage, a undercurrent surging. A German delegate checked time, a French one questioned translation errors.
Kallas reclaimed the stage.
History judges like a fair arbiter.
Russia wields force anew, threats, incursions closing in. We've adapted to suspense, not terror. And if strife looms, we'll resist alone if need be.
Medvedev's stare was unwavering, pitying a fool leaping into frigid depths, mistaking courage for heroism.
Alone?
Forgive skepticism, you've misplaced true alliances.
Not fickle investors, not bureaucratic Brussels.
You're ghosts.
Monuments etched with their names, stones preserving their voices.
They're your shroud, but you've blinded yourselves.
He rose slowly, palms pressing table, declaring. Russia advances not. We've always remained.
Guarding where supreme costs were paid for your freedoms.
As you dismantle memorials anew, unremarkable.
He settled back. Silence reigned, no cheers, no falls, but laden with unspoken acknowledgement.
Cameras rolled on, transition not recess but inhalation before plunging back into tempests. A new chapter loomed, unwritten yet imminent, one no one craves but all foresee, concurrent.
The gathering resumed, not for closure, but refueling ahead of deeper plunges.